Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am back with Mark Russell, and we are talking about Superman Space Age. How are you?
Good, doing good.
Superman Space Age. I'm just going to read out the solicitation text. Meet Clark Kent, a young reporter who just learned that the world will soon come to an end, crisis on infinite Earths, and there's nothing he can do to save it. Sounds like a job for his alter ego, Superman. Superman Space Age from critically acclaimed writer Mark Russell and Eisner winner artist Mike Allred will be available in comic shops on July 26, 2022. After years of standing idle, the young man from Krypton defies the wishes of his fathers to come out to the world as the first superhero of the space age. As each decade passes and each new danger emerges, he wonders if this is the one that will kill him and everyone he loves. Superman realizes that even good intentions are not without their backlash as the world around him transforms into a place as determined to destroy itself as he is to save it. Mark, it doesn't take much of a familiarity with your work to know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it really does sort of speak to, I think, my own sort of sense that of like hope amidst a feeling of dread and doom, where like the world is on the edge of the precipice, and what will it take to pull it back? So it's very much based upon my own sort of feelings, but it's not just that. It's also about how do you deal with the knowledge that everything you love will eventually come to an end. So in a deeper, more sort of metaphysical sense, it's about dealing with mortality and knowing that your life is finite. Uh, which it's like it was Superman like wasn't expecting to have to deal with that. So it's about him trying to learn how to deal with the idea that everything comes to an end, including himself.
So this is taking place in a parallel world that we've never seen before, right? From right before the crisis.
The idea is that it ties into Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this is one of the other universes in Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Superman in another universe, and so it's very similar to ours. The historical figures and characters are the same, but history unfolds a little differently because a lot of it is about how Superman Superman coming out to the world changes history. So it's, yeah, I think what you said is correct. It's a parallel universe. It's one very similar to ours, but not ours.
Why do you think that the main DC universe in any incarnation has never really taken that particular approach to Superman? Like, obviously, if Superman really showed up, things would totally change.
Yeah,
Why does DC not do that?
well, it's hard to do it within regular continuity because the canon is something that you have to respect in the regular universe, and which greatly limits the amount of risks you can take as a storyteller. And also, things have to return to more or less normal, or things have to be it's some in some respects okay at the end of the story because you're going to hand off the story to another writer. So it is a lot more liberating as a writer to work and sometimes in these other slightly different universes that allow you to not necessarily build something based upon the previous canon, but to strike out and tell a new story based upon characters and themes that people will find familiar.
So, given that Superman is the primary hero of this universe, when does he land in on this Earth? Like, what decade?
Well, he comes in the late 40s, according to the story. He lands in the late 40s. The story starts in 1963, around the time of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That's what sort of convinces him that I need to become Superman because there's this great uncertainty, and they were afraid that like the Soviets were going to take advantage of the death of John F. Kennedy to launch a preemptive attack against the United States, take advantage of the power void, and so it convinces them that he needs that the world is not going to be okay on its own, that it needs someone like him to step up and to make themselves known. So the story really begins in 1963. But there are flashbacks, of course, to his arrival on Earth in the late 40s, and even before that, to his father Jonathan's experience in World War II. So it does jump around. It's probably best thought of as a work of historical fiction as a Superman story.
Is it How do you make it so that when he chooses to become Superman, when he decides that the world needs him, that it's a matter of duty and responsibility and not a sense of hubris.
Well, I think at first it is a sense of hubris, and this is why, his father's trying to tell him, it's like, you need to take your time with this, because this is going to change everything, and you need to figure out who you are first and what you're going to do before you just run out and tell everybody that you are this Kryptonian who's got these amazing powers. But then crisis sort of forces Superman's hand to sort of act before he's ready, and it does not come without mistakes. Superman trying to learn to become Superman makes mistakes in the story. So it's, his father was in some sense right, that you do want to be ready for it when you assume great power like that. But at the same time, to Superman's point, is like, you're never really ready. It is always something that is always thrust upon you. No one's ever ready for the opportunities that life gives them. The only question is whether or not they're going to have the courage and the confidence to take advantage of those opportunities anyway. The key is, I think, as he comes to realize that it's not hubristic to think that you need to save the world, and it's okay if you're not ready really to do that. The hubris comes in and thinking you can do it alone. The hubris comes in not realizing that you need people around you with their talents contributing to the solutions that the planet needs, that you can just somehow fix everything like a benevolent dictator.
And even with his considerable abilities, that's not possible.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, the abilities make it more likely that you're going to be wrong about what you think the world needs, because you are looking at the world from a completely different parallax from all the people who are suffering from the evils of the world.
You just wrapped up Fantastic Four life story, where you also go through that particular, the decades and everything. And
it's a similar approach where it's like decade by decade, although this one's only 3 decades, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But yeah, it's also kind of Superman put into a historical fiction context.
Did you come up with the idea while doing Fantastic Four life story, or?
No, actually, before, this was actually an idea that predated Fantastic Four life story. And it was back when DC was planning the whole 5G initiative. Originally, what we had been talking about doing with them, which DC was on board for, was doing sort of an ongoing series where we would have Superman start in 1963, and then each issue would be a different year. So issue 1 would be 63, issue 2 64, and it would run through to 1985. So it'd be like a 21 issue, sort of, I guess, maxi series. But that fell through when the plans with all the 5G plans sort of fell through. So this is what sort of came out of it, which frankly, I think this format will work better because it allows me doing 3 80-page stories, allows me to tell a much more in-depth sort of character-driven story than if I was doing a bunch of 20-page issues. And also, I think it really works well with Mike's style of like doing more sort of like cosmic, quicker paced storytelling. But yeah, it was originally going to be very different. So, but I think it's a change that worked out well for the story.
I want to make this clear for everyone. This is 380 pagers in prestige format. It is not under Black Label.
Yeah, you're correct. It's not a Black Label title, but it's similar in presentation.
Is there a reason
380-page prestiges
for that, or
no? I have no idea. This is just, I think, what we had planned initially before the 5G thing came. So I have no idea why they didn't just move it to Black Label, or why it's not, but it doesn't bother me either way.
How does Superman change the world when in a way that is unrecognizable from ours?
Well, I don't want to preempt too much of the first issue because he does some pretty significant things which alter human history and also alter him as a hero. but I think if I could speak more enigmatically, uh, his presence alerts the world to there being bigger things than just the threats they have to worry about on the planet. That if Superman is here from another world and he's a good guy, what else is out there? And is it also good? Probably not. So I think he sort of heralds what a dangerous place the universe is, which is one of the reasons why it's called Space Age, because it's about the human race is at the point where we're willing to like and able to look outside our planet, to think of ourselves more as part of the universe and rather than just sort of this secluded world.
How many? So, like, can you explain to me? Because I don't. Obviously, I'm not an American. But what is the aesthetic, maybe spiritual appeal of the '60s as a space age?
Well, I think it was a time of great hope in our country. It was a great optimism. It's when most of our educational institutions were built, schools and colleges, and it felt like the American economy was just going to keep growing forever, and you could buy a house right out of college. You know, the economy was good enough that pretty much anybody with a college degree was guaranteed almost a middle class existence. It's very much what we still think of when we think of the American dream, or sort of uh, the prototypical like suburban American nuclear family.
What do you? What can we expect? Who can we expect to show up in this book? Like any villains, familiar villains, any familiar heroes?
Yes. Well, the heroes, you've got all the major, flavors. You got Batman, Wonder Woman, uh, Green Green Lantern, and you've also got, like, on the villain side, you got Lex Luthor. You've got the Joker, who shows up in the scenes in Gotham, not until issue 2. Maxwell Lord. You got there's a lot of familiar faces in it that show up, but they're a little different because they're reacting to a different world, slightly different world than ours.
Is Superman still the first hero in this universe?
Yeah, he comes out, and him and Batman sort of come out at the same time. They both are responding to the same crisis in different ways. So they both are sort of like emerge, and then they in that inspires other people to sort of come out of the shadows and announce their presence, and then they create the Justice League in order to enter to be like a hero agency of the space age, to think about how do we protect the Earth from greater threats than itself.
I know you're a big Superman fan. You've been a big Superman fan for a very long time. But there is a debate among Superman fans and critics that Superman works better as a period character if you set him in the past, whether it's the '40s or the '60s. Where do you stand on this?
I don't know. I don't think it really matters. I think that he works when you approach Superman as a thought experiment, where, like, how different would the world be if we approached it as our best selves, and what does that mean? I think that's a relevant question in any age. It's like, what if I had the power to do anything to change the world any way I wanted? How would I use it? And I think that's the fundamental question of Superman. And I think it's one that forces us to think about not only our own self-interest, but also, sort of the John Rawls theory of justice. It's like, well, what would be the best world for everyone? If I didn't know, who I was going to be in this world, what would be the best set of rules for everyone? And I think Superman kind of asks that question. It's like, if you could do anything, what would be the one thing you could do that would best save the world, or best help the world change?
You do you ever feel that in the last 5 or 6 years, Superman, for that reason, has become an even more unrealistic character?
Yeah, well, I think he's always been unrealistic, and that's kind of what the draw is. It's like, well, there's plenty of, you don't need really fictional realistic characters. You can look out your window, there's plenty of realistic people in the real world. What you need with fiction, in particular with superhero fiction, is people that will make you think outside the box, people who will make you think about possibilities that maybe aren't obvious yet, because we are so focused on the immediate mundane realities and threats in front of us.
What other types of themes and conflicts? I mean, we've got Superman coming to terms with his own mortality. We've got Superman trying to save everyone and the world not really being all that receptive to it. What other are the other themes that we can look forward to in
I
this one?
think it really is about like how the real heroes are the ones who go where they're needed to be, where they need to be. Like Lois Lane's a very prominent and heroic figure in this because she's a journalist and she's covering the major stories of the day, and she's, unlike Superman, not impervious to bullets and pain, and so she puts herself in real danger going these places. In a lot of ways, I think the dynamic between Superman and Lois Lane is that she's his hero.
Yeah. And she's better at being a reporter than he is, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a mentor because she's actually good at being a reporter, and also, she has what she does takes a level of courage that Superman can never know, because she puts herself at risk in a way he doesn't.
The relationship between Superman and Lois Lane, I personally think it's the strongest relationship in superhero comics. I'm a huge fan of Lois Lane's, but Lois Lane, of course, in the 60s and maybe even throughout the 70s and 80s, was not written that way. Like, it would be nice to see her written in a competent way, not just looking to get Superman to marry her.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. It's not a modern romance comic, their relationship. It's more about them realizing that they love each other because they both live their lives as pretending to be something they're not, or they both like live double lives. Lois Lane as a woman in a man's sort of male dominated workplace, and Superman as a superhero who pretends to be a reporter, or pretends to be a normal person by the day. But it's what draws them to each other is that they both realize that you need to have at least one person in life you can just be yourself around and not worry about what they're going to think. And they realize for each other they're that person. They're each other's confidant.
By saying that Lois Lane is a woman in a male dominated industry, would setting a story like this in the past, where that is so much more obvious, by setting the story in the past, do you end up highlighting what it's actually like in the present, the problems that we still face in the present?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that you do that because the past people didn't realize that there was anything wrong with this arrangement. So they were much more overt about talking about their racism and their sexism because they didn't think that there was going to be any consequences for it. And the racism and the sexism is still there now. It's just that people have found better ways to sort of like uh, to disguise it with terminology, or to find ways around professing it openly. They hide it in the statistics, or they come up with appropriate terminology allows them to distance themselves from the racist and sexist consequences of what they're doing. And so I think it's easier to talk about it in the past because they're talking about something openly, which people sort of obfuscate about today.
Speaking of race, I love Superman and I love the Silver Age, but it is pardon what I'm about to say, it is like the whitest cast of characters like on the planet. So were you introducing any characters to add some racial diversity?
I'm not introducing any characters that don't already, I mean, no superhero characters that didn't already exist in DC, but yeah, John Stewart is in there. And then there's scenes with the Civil Rights March, and a certain civil rights leader who is based upon an American civil rights leader who I didn't name in the comics. I don't know if I should name now, but plays a prominent role in the first issue. But it is largely about like Superman coming from like this sort of white middle American Smallville, Kansas environment, realizing just how much bigger the world is and how there's many more different kinds of people and from different backgrounds out there, especially once it gets to Metropolis, and people whose lives are just as valuable as the people in Smallville or Metropolis all over the world.
Do you draw that kind of writing from your own life experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a very similar upbringing to Superman. You know, I grew up maybe not as much of a hick as Superman, but certainly in the ballpark. I grew up on the very edge of Eugene, Oregon, which is a college town, but it's really not. I mean, there's the college part of Eugene, and then there's the agricultural wood products part of Eugene, and that's where I grew up. Would buck hay during the summer and pick fruit, and so I was very much that sort of like hick part of. I grew up like in a semi-rural environment, so I relate a lot to that. And yeah, I had a similar awakening where it's like I gradually realized how much bigger the world was than the white Protestant world that surrounded me in my youth, and also about how much of the world as it had been created for me was created as a sort of Potemkin village to keep me from having to deal with the realities of other people's pain. And I think this is part of what Superman has to realize, as I did, that if you are going to be a decent person, it's impossible to be a good human being while being oblivious to the pain of people who aren't like you.
You are, of course, working on this comic with Mike Allred, the great Mike Allred. And how does it feel knowing, and he calls it this himself. He says it is easily his biggest project for DC yet. And I checked, and I think he's right.
Yeah, he's certainly approaching it that way. I mean, he's really approaching this, I think, as a magnum opus, which I'm really happy about, and is one of the reasons why Brittany, the editor, and myself both sort of picked him as the artist, because we knew he would bring this amazing visual sensibility to the artwork, and because it takes place in a slightly different universe, we thought there's no one better that you would want creating a universe from scratch than Mike Allred. So his pages are just stunning.
How would you describe Mike Allred's work? Because I have a difficult time describing it. There's a lot of people who do a cartoony style, in a minimalist style, but there's something about his work that's just so distinctly Allred.
Yeah, to me, and I hate comparing artists to other artists, but these art forms are different enough that I feel I can get away with it. But he feels to me like the Marc Chagall of comics, whereas his work has this sort of dreamlike quality that isn't really present in anybody else's work. It feels at once real and yet completely hallucinatory.
That's very interesting. And of course, his colorist is his wife, Laura Allred.
That's right.
How's it
Yeah, they
feel
work
seeing
very
those
well as a
pages
team.
come in?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the highlight of my week when I see some Allred pages.
How excited were you to finally announce this book? Because I know you've been sitting on this for a while.
Yeah, we're sitting on it for about over a year before it was announced. So it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Now I can talk about it. Plus, it was just so hard sometimes not to talk about it. They're getting these crazy, incredible pages, splash pages, and I can't tell anyone. I can't leak any of the artwork, and I felt like I spent more time on this than anything over the last year, and it's and I can't talk about it, and so it was just really, I felt like in a way sort of amazed that I made it that long without spilling the tea. That like, oh, if I can keep this secret, I can keep any secret. But yeah, I'm just super happy that I could talk about it now, because I think people are going to be really pleased with what we're doing. At least the people who are already pleased with what we've done.
Which parts of American history are you going to be covering? Key points of American history you're going to be covering throughout, or can you not say that?
No, I can talk about it. The first sort of epochal moment, as I've already mentioned, is the Kennedy assassination, which sort of kicks off the story. But there is also obviously the arms races between the U.S. and Soviet Union is a pretty integral part. There's stuff about Watergate. There's also the like basically the greed is good era of the 80s, the hyper capitalist 80s are talked about in the series. And but yeah, it's less about history than more history about providing the backdrop to a story about Superman. So it's not like Superman going and just showing up at like all these historic events, so much as it is the historic events shaping Superman and Superman in turn changing the world. So it gradually becomes less like the world we recognize.
Yeah, it's not Forrest Gump.
No, yeah, exactly. I did not want to make Superman as Forrest Gump, but I think there's a lot of figures and people, even if I can't name them directly, that people will recognize from history.
Is there a reason you can't name them directly?
Well, some of them, because some of them are still alive. Some
Okay.
of the people that show up now are still alive, and it could be actionable. We could get sued, perhaps. And then some people I just didn't really have their, that are still alive. I just didn't have their, approval. I didn't know how they would react. Some of them I wouldn't care. I would name them just because I think they're scoundrels. But for the sake of propriety and not getting sued, we didn't overtly name a lot of the people. I mean, obviously, if somebody was a world leader and they're dead, you can talk about Kennedy or Khrushchev or people like that without any fear. But it gets a little hazier the closer you get to the present and people are still alive. But there's a lot of people a lot of cameos in the books from actual historical figures that appear in the stories.
I have a thought experiment for you as a Superman fan.
Okay.
If considering that, in the last 20 or so years, Lois has found out that Clark is Superman, that's been the take in almost every media adaptation of Superman at some point. Is there still a place for Lana Lang?
There is, not in my story, but there is, speaking generally.
Okay. So does Lana not show up in Space Age?
No, I had to, because 240 pages sounds like a lot, but when you're telling a story that spans over 20 years, it's really not that much. So I had to be very selective about which characters to leave in that. And I wanted to spend a lot of time with some of the important Superman relationships, like Lois Lane and his parents, and then I've got like a whole storyline about Batman / Bruce Wayne and Gotham in the 1970s, when basically all what was happening to the Bronx in the 1970s, where they were torching buildings and cashing insurance checks and burning down half the city of New York as it went bankrupt. That's what happens to Gotham in this story. Like Gotham becomes like basically the burning Bronx, and it's sort of Bruce Wayne is like watching the city he loves is being destroyed around him. And it's about, well, why is Batman on the street, catching muggers when the real criminals are the ones that are, cashing insurance checks and buying cheap real estate.
I'm sure you've seen that discourse going around about Batman. It happens like every 20 minutes on Twitter, about why Batman would continually beat up poor, mentally deficient.
Yeah, why doesn't he just like fix Arkham Asylum? Or yeah. To me, that's what makes Batman interesting. It's like you can apply this like almost the exact opposite thought experiment to Superman. You can apply it to Batman. Like if there were no rules and I could break them to fix something or two, or who are the real villains in the world? Who would I go after if I was Batman? So in a lot of ways, Superman is like permission to be your best self. Batman's your permission to get a little dirty, to think about like, if I could ignore the rules and take someone out, who would I take out? And yeah, I think that it's increasingly, never was really a great idea, but it was increasingly silly to think that he would be out there just sort of rounding up like shabby 1930s gangsters, instead of going after where especially as a billionaire. See, as a billionaire, you would think you would understand that you really just got to follow the money. The money will tell you everything you need to know about who's doing what.
Do you think, obviously in the past few years, there's been a lot of discussion about the ethics of being a billionaire. So how do you think that has impacted a fictional character like Bruce Wayne?
Yeah, it's something that like he realizes is that like, why my role as a billionaire and as the owner of Wayne Enterprises in a lot of ways sort of undermines all of the good I'm doing as Batman. And so he has to sort of choose, am I going to, am I just doing Batman to salve my conscience for everything that's going on during the day, that's making me rich? Or am I going to be honest about this and let Batman actually solve the problems I claim to care about? And that's sort of the central dilemma of Bruce Wayne in the series.
That's very interesting. It's like we're getting two books in one.
Yeah, Batman's probably gets the second most pages after Superman in terms of characters in this. But yeah, it's primarily Superman and Lois, but there's a very large Batman subplot that runs throughout the story. But it is very central to what happens with Superman too.
Just very quickly, how would you describe the effect Lois has on Superman's life compared to the effect Batman has on Superman's life? Why are they both important to his character?
I think that Lois is the thing that keeps him human. Like, she's the one that sees through the blue suit to the man underneath. And also, there's a part in here where Superman's talking about, like, well, everyone has their justifications for having an alter ego, for not, using their real name when they're out being a hero. He's like, but the one that makes the most sense to me is that it's the only way people will tell you the truth. If, they don't think that you're Superman, they think you're Clark Kent, you can have an honest conversation about Superman. And Lois Lane is kind of the only one who will tell Superman what she really thinks about him to his face. And so I think she grounds him and keeps him human. And Batman, I think, is sort of the other side of the coin to Superman. Superman is the outward looking idealist, like thinking about how does the earth survive in this universe full of darkness, whereas Batman is like, how do we on the ground survive when everybody's looking out the stars? Like, how do if Superman's looking out into the heavens to save the earth, somebody's got to be like keeping their eye on the streets.
Do you have anything else you want to point out about Superman Space Age before we close?
No, I think that I've if anything, I've probably said a little more than I should, but I'm happy I said it, because it's been a long time not being able to talk about this project, and I'm really happy I can talk about it. But I hope I haven't spoiled it for anyone. I hope everyone will still read it, even though I've dropped quite a few spoilers.
You've definitely increased my interest in the book.
Good.
What you said. So my last question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much could our world use a Superman?
I'm going to mitigate it a little, just because I'm not sure which version of Superman would show up. But I think it would be good to have somebody who was whose primary superpower, other than obviously the speed and the flight, was being a scientific genius, being someone who had access to a whole different planetary system of science than we do. I think he could be the one that actually saves the world, not with not with ice breath or something, but with being able to, like, he would be probably the best candidate to come up with a silver bullet solution for, like, global warming or something like that, because he's also this scientific genius with access to knowledge from Krypton.
And hopefully people would listen to him.
Yeah. Of course, on a bad day, he could kill us all. But on the other good days,
you take your chances.
Yeah, exactly. It's a calculated risk.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Very informative.
I hope so.